You know, like when you're complaining, to your friend about your boyfriend and you only ever tell him the bad things? And they're like, I thought you hated him. And you're like, no, I literally love him. He's great. And they're like, well, that's not what you told me. So just know it's probably going to come off like I did not like this book because the critiques are somehow easier to share, if that makes sense. So just keep that in mind.
Right.
Look, I'm already ready. I'm like doing my debate breath. I'm like,
no, I'm laughing because I did the same thing. And so then I was like, it's a relatable feeling. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Booked on Fantasy podcast.
I'm Addison.
I'm Rain, and we are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through book shows and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Today, we are offering you just our final Onyx Storm wrap-up episode. So this is going to be our book rating, likes and dislikes, some predictions, some questions. We're not going to promise it's going to be short, but hopefully it'll be quicker than our normal episode. So without further ado, let's get into it. As a quick reminder, we are a spoiler-free podcast, but now that we have finished all of Onyx Storm, we will definitely be talking about the full book, so make sure that you have read that before you continue on with the episode. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where we will have adult conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. So now that we're done with Onyx Storm, we do plan to go back to Throne of Glass, which we had temporarily paused after Queen of Shadows. Once we get this episode and then our theories episode for Onyx Storm out of the way, we will pick back up with Empire of Storms. Whether you were listening previously and you temporarily paused, or, maybe you haven't checked out our Throne of Glass coverage yet. And if you want to start that, then definitely check out those episodes and continue on with us.
We strongly encourage you to do that. That's 8 full books of pure joy and despair. And also 8 books of Addison and Lorraine.
Woo! We're very excited to get back into TOG. Should be fun. So without further ado, let us get into our episode, starting with our overall book rating. So overall, I, Lorraine, am going to give this book a 4. And here are some of my reasons for that. I genuinely thought that we'd get more answers than we did. I kind of felt like we were set up to think we'd at least get more information about a possible cure or the Irids, but ultimately what we learned from that entire kind of like middle section of the book was very little compared to the amount of time that we spent on it. We never got our damn answers. And so I'm a little upset about that. But in general, I felt like there was a lot of action, which was exciting and jaw-dropping in the moment. But kind of when you zoom out just a little bit, it felt to me like it was just kind of distracting and meant to entertain us so that perhaps we don't think too much about the lack of answers. Mostly, I just wanted more of Violet's actual thinking process because I kind of felt like I was watching Violet on a show rather than actually reading a book from her POV, where I should be getting like more of her internal thought processes about things. I feel like the only thing that we got her thoughts about was like stuff about her love for Xaden, basically. And
I was going to say...
What about the runes? What about the Irids? What about the venom in any of your research? No questions were asked. And so
it was all Zaddy this and Zaddy that.
Mostly about Xaden. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. But the plot, okay, the plot. That we
the Violet, the plot.
That being said, it was a good book and I enjoyed it. I guess we'll see how everything comes together in the next book. And I think that will really like retroactively change how I view this book. But for now, this is how I feel. It just didn't quite grip me in the same way that Fourth Wing and Iron Flame did, and it felt a little bit disjointed to me overall. But to be clear, although this sounds a little critical, it does not mean that I didn't enjoy the book or that I don't like the series. I still love the Empyrean series as a whole. So, also, I will caveat and say that I do think that expectations beforehand going into a book play a huge role and influence how you feel about the book after you read it. So I think because I really thought we were going to get a bunch of answers about stuff, then when we didn't get them, it felt a little bit more disappointing compared to how it probably would have felt if I had just totally gone in blank slate and didn't have anything that I was expecting to see, was just gonna read it through, enjoy it for what it was. And also if we weren't reading these quite so critically. Our deep dive books definitely pay much closer attention to things than honestly I probably would otherwise. So
no, that's a really good point, actually. That's something I've thought about in general, not just for this book, but other books we've covered on the podcast, is does deep diving them and thinking so deeply and really looking at them under a microscope make me enjoy them more or less? Because, or I guess enjoy more or less is not the right way, but how does it change or alter my experience from a normal reading perspective? I definitely think in this instance, the deep dive probably hurt my overall reading experience from the perspective of enjoyment. I had to look at it with a much more critical eye. So I totally know what you mean. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, how did you feel about the answers in this book? I wasn't really sure.
We didn't get any damn answers. That's what I didn't have anything to feel about them because we didn't get any. So
I know. I feel like every episode we're like, would sure love some answers on that. We didn't get any damn answers.
Why didn't ask any questions? Yeah. Oops.
That was our mantra for this podcast, for these books. Sure would like some answers on that. But anyways.
So overall, it was a 4 for me. Addison, what did you think about this book?
Oh, boy. Okay, so let me just caveat this by saying 2 things about me you need to know. Number 1 is that I did competitive debate for almost 10 years. And so sometimes in these end of book reviews, I go into this other headspace where I'm it's an argument I need to win for both sides. And so it can come out really intense. And so just know I can't turn that part of my brain off. So I also want to say, when you're complaining, to your friend about your boyfriend and you only ever tell him the bad things. And they're I thought you hated him. And you're no, I literally love him. He's great. And they're well, that's not what you told me. So just know it's probably going to come off I did not like this book because the critiques are somehow easier to share, if that makes sense. So just keep that in mind throughout this episode. I'm already ready. I'm doing my debate breath. I'm
no, I'm laughing because I did the same thing. And so then I was it's a relatable feeling.
Yeah.
So you are not alone.
Excellent. So I had a really hard time giving this book an actual numerical rating, and anything in the 4s seemed too high, but anything in the 3s really seemed too low and like a disservice. So I settled on exactly a 4.0. And then I also kind of weighted my rating based on how I rate Fourth Wing and Iron Flame. Because honestly, Fourth Wing for me was 5.0, 5 stars, chef's kiss. And then Iron Flame was probably like a 4.7, somewhere in there, right? So you can see that's a pretty steep decline for Onyx Storm. And as Lorraine, you pointed out, which I think is really accurate, I think book 4 will really retroactively change our perspective. But we don't have book 4, so we're going to go off book 3. I will give more nuanced criticisms and praises in the likes and dislikes section, but I'm going to give you some high-level reasoning for why I rated this book the way I did. Ultimately, this book screams to me, I am a middle child, which makes sense because it is. It's the 3rd book in a 5-book series. Obviously, we have 2 books to go, and I won't be able to say for sure until I at least read the next book. But my overall impression of this book is that Rebecca originally intended for this book to be a 3-book series. That's public knowledge. And when she was writing Iron Flame, she pivoted to make it a 5-book series, which, yes, give us more, right? My impression based on interviews and stuff is that originally Iron Flame and Onyx Storm were supposed to be combined into one book. So to me, it feels like Rebecca committed to the 5 books at the time, both publicly to her fans and her publisher. But when she was writing this book, she realized she had 2 more huge books to go and was like, oh shit, I need content for those 2 books. I can't resolve all of these things because what will I do for the next 2 books? And so she was kind of like, well, I need something that drives the story, but is kind of more like a filler. And that's exactly what this book read like to me, sort of a filler book, where she didn't want to give away too much, but she wanted to make sure she gave herself enough content for book 4 and 5, and also give her, I think there's a lot of future potential plot points she could pull from this book, but there are also ones that she could never touch again. So she kind of gave herself a springboard for a lot of different directions she could take book 4 and 5. As Lorraine said, this book has a lot of exciting moments and action sequences, which were very well written and really fun to read, to be honest. I actually really enjoyed the expansion of the world with the Isle Kingdoms. I thought she did a great job with all the isles and their descriptions, as well as the creation of their cultures and how each of those connected with a different god. But in my opinion, there was too much expansion and not enough resolution of questions and outstanding issues from previous books. I love a good cliffhanger. Who doesn't, right? Think about the way Fourth Wing ended in Iron Flame. I was hooked. I was like, oh my God, salivating for the next book. But in each of those books, it's because I felt like I learned a lot, but also knew there was more out there waiting for us. And I don't feel that way about this book now. I know there's more out there for us, but I don't feel that there was any resolution or anything that was satisfying. I also felt like she was intentionally withholding information just to create and facilitate speculation. The withholding did not drive the plot in a meaningful way. And that was very frustrating, to be totally honest.
I agree with that.
We didn't get any damn answers. That was a fancy way to say we didn't get any damn answers. My last overarching critique is that I think when you are a writer, you have complete and total creative control of the world you build because, well, you quite literally built it from your imagination, and as well you should. My impression of Rebecca Yarros is that when she is writing a book, she lives in the world. Like, she is fully immersed. I think she doesn't even really come up for air, right? And that's great because it makes it a really immersive experience. And it's nice to have an author that cares so deeply about the world and the character she's created. But in this book specifically, I felt like it was confusing at times. There were many times when I had to backtrack and I was like, wait, who? What? Where? When? Why? How? And I had just reread Iron Flame. Like, I've read this series multiple times. And I think because she was weaving in people and places that had barely been mentioned before, and now all of a sudden they were important. I'm looking at you, Llewellyn and Lynx. Okay, who are you? And I think Rebecca Yarros just assumed we were much smarter readers than we actually are and would intuitively know these things and people and places she was talking about because she knows them. But she also has the privilege of being the one who created the world. You know what I'm saying? Does that make sense?
Right. The lack of exposition, as we've talked about.
That's one of my dislikes. Yeah. So we'll talk about it more there. But I think that happens in any creative process, right? I'm sure if you were to talk to us about podcast stuff, we could go too deep and people are like, I don't know anything about podcasting. What the fuck are you talking about? And everybody has a tendency to do that with things they're passionate about. It's just, harder when millions of people read your book. Yeah, that was kind of my overall reason for my rating.
Yeah, so solid 4 for both of us. So next we have our specific likes and dislikes to go over, and we'll start off with the positive. First of all, I actually did enjoy seeing Violet grow as a character. I think her confidence and her bias for action really went up in this book, which was great. She stood her ground in her beliefs, and rather than, wait for someone else to give her permission to do things, she realized that the only way to get things done was to take it into her own hands. Violet is also such a strong character in her determination and strength, and it was cool to see her grow as a leader among the writers and simultaneously also remain so steadfast in her love for Xaden and her belief that, he is still Xaden.
Yes, and his soul is still worth saving.
Yeah. Zaddy! Where are you? I also loved getting the different POVs at the end and just a little more insight into the other characters and the social dynamics of people outside of Violet. And actually, dare I say, I loved the side characters a lot more.
You were going to say more than Violet and Xaden, weren't you? You were going to say it. I know you were.
Can I say, I love the side characters. I really love them a lot. Riddick, chef's kiss, he stole the book. And had I just read chapters about Riddick and Atram, I would have been great. I would have been satisfied and happy. Yeah. But I also love the little side romances that we got to see. And then also we got Rhea and Imogen's POV, which was really unique and interesting to me. Plus Theophany. As much as I didn't like her because she's obviously a villain, I also thought that she was an excellent villain. Just really enjoyed her Chaos Queen energy. You never know what she was going to do. You never knew when she was going to pop in out of nowhere, and it was very unexpected. Every time I feel like being a menace, I'm going to start saying, "Time to play, Lorraine." And that's just going to be my alter
mantra.
ego coming out. Yes.
Ooh, I like that. We need a name for your evil alter ego. Instead of Lorraine, I don't know. We'll workshop that.
Lori. Lori's coming out to play today, guys.
Lori's coming out to play.
And yeah, anyways, also like simultaneously, the love of the side characters does kind of meld a little bit into a slight dislike because when I find myself more engaged with what side characters are doing in a single POV book,
that's fair.
So, I don't know. Or maybe that was intentional. Who knows? But overall, like, lots of exciting things going on. Lots of jump scare gotcha moments that I think are going to be really cool to see on TV. And they definitely got me, like, while I was in the book. But, yeah.
Okay, cool. You know, it's funny how you say it's time to play. I'll just be like to my husband, hey, first thing you need to know about me is I'm careful with my words. And the second thing you need to know is I also lie. And then I'll just like run out of the room. I don't know why, but that line just lives rent-free in my head. I just love it.
Basically 2 ways of saying I lie. Like,
yes. Yeah. I don't know. There's something about that I was like, ooh, what a villain thing to say. I loved it.
Yeah. Anyways, what were your likes for this book?
Well, I wrote a novel for this as well, so buckle up, everybody. As I mentioned earlier, I thought the Isles were a really cool way to expand the world. Thought she did a great job of building the cultures, especially in relation to each god and goddess they worship. I thought the descriptions of the places in particular were really neat as well. In particular, I actually really enjoyed the Devarelli chapters and all of King Cortland's bullshit. I really liked that whole little plot line. And Hedotus, actually. I really enjoyed Hedotus. I enjoyed the dinner scene. Friendly reminder, don't eat the cake. Like you were good on cake for a while. But I don't know, I really liked that. I thought that was like one of the most engaging parts of the book for me. I also really enjoyed the incorporation of realistic elements of war. We talked about this a lot in the deep dives, but I really enjoyed all the discussions about finding the balance between following command and staying loyal to your squad. I thought that the entire theme was tied together really, really well throughout the book and ultimately had a good resolution at the end. We see in both Violet and Rhiannon's POVs at the end, they both show character growth and recognizing the importance they play in the roles that they are assigned and how that helps the squad function, how that helps the unit function, how that helps the riot function. And so I liked that there was growth and acknowledgement of that throughout the book. Secondary to that, I loved all the politics in this book, specifically everything that is going on with the provincial commitments and the potential for Tyrrendor to become independent. I think that's really exciting. I like it a lot. However, I will caveat that with, I do think it could have been explained better in some areas, more so in the beginning. As the book got on, it was easier to digest and understand. But in the beginning, I felt like, whoa, wait, what? You know, kind of vibe.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Also, like you, I thought Theophany was a fantastic villain. As you like to say, she never let him know her next move, you know? As I said in the last 2 deep dives, Theo has style. You gotta admit, okay, she's bad, but she's good at being bad. And she was just great to read. She had great dialogue. She was powerful. She had very interesting motivations. She had a really intriguing backstory that really made her multidimensional instead of just this soulless, power-hungry, generic villain. You know, she really had personality and things that made her distinct as a villain, and I really liked that a lot as well. My last notable like was Riddick like a third Gamlin.
Yes.
Need I say more? I mean, it's Riddick. But of course, I have plenty more to say, so don't worry. In all seriousness, obviously he's super funny and brings a lot of comedic relief, which is really enjoyable to read. But I thought actually Riddick had a lot of character growth in this book, and I loved that.
Yeah.
I liked that he showed his caring side, like when he insisted on going with Violet on the Quest Squad mission. He was really supportive of Sawyer and his journey through navigating what life is like for himself with, you know, losing part of his leg and what that means for him as a rider. And then most importantly, how he advocated for Violet's safety and well-being after he found out Xaden was a venom. That whole conversation between Violet and Riddick is so great because I think we have this impression that Riddick is kind of a clown and he's kind of immature. And in that serious conversation, Riddick is by far the most mature, well-regulated adult in the room. And I loved that. I'm like, yeah, Riddick. Yeah, fuck yeah, you know? I also like that he stood up for himself and basically told everyone just because he's funny and jokes around doesn't mean he's not capable. And I liked that. And last, I mean, this is just kind of silly, but I like seeing him develop his signet more. That was really, really cool. Like when he froze that wyvern, I was like, wow, like that was dope.
I love that. Actually, as we're talking about this, I did have one more because it was literally like my primary job in this podcast, and that is God Watch.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my God. Lorraine, how did you forget that in your likes?
I don't know.
Oh, my God. You know what?
Don't know. But I did really like keeping track and learning more about the gods because it feels like they're becoming much more prominent and important to the story. So they're no longer just, world building lore. It feels like they're actually going to come into play, like for real, which I'm excited about.
Oh, you didn't like it. You loved it. You loved it. You did.
I liked learning about them and their involvement with people's souls. So add that to my likes as well. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Now we have some dislikes. And just know if there are more dislikes, it's because for whatever reason, it was just easier to think about.
Yep.
Again, doesn't mean I'm being a negative Nancy, okay? These are our thoughts.
It just means Lori's out to play.
It just means Lori's out tonight, okay? It's 9:50 p.m. She's a little cranky, and it is what it is. Just kidding.
She needs a nap.
Yeah, and a sweet treat. But anyways, first, I really wanted Violet to ask more questions. There were so many opportunities for her to do so, and she never did. Plus, considering this is Violet's POV, I'm actually surprised at how little we got of her general thinking. As I kind of stated earlier, most of her internal dialogue or a lot of her thoughts that we were privy to felt like they were primarily about Xaden, but anything else, either she got cut off or she wouldn't think about it at all. And I was like, go off scribe or not.
Or not. I was going to say or not at all.
So I guess she's more writer these days than scribe. We'll go with that. I just needed her to ask more questions and think about things a little bit more so that I could know information. So really, I'm just being selfish. Next, considering how important historical context is, I actually did not feel like we really get that much that was actually helpful to understand the overall world. We've had this feeling history is repeating itself, yet no one was really going back to look for clues. I guess Jacinia was put on some research, but learned barely anything about what she was researching, on behalf of Quest Squad and stuff like that. Violet was trained as a scribe, and that has been this key thing about her character, but we never see her fully scribing. While I did like the time at the Isles, they were exciting, but what did we really learn from being there? The most interesting one that actually gave me a little bit of information felt like Unbriel, and then the rest of them were just kind of more for action and excitement. Could we have spent a little bit more time uncovering information that was intentionally kept out of the curriculum? And I feel like that would have been important because it would tell you why things actually happened in the first place. How do you know what to look for if you don't know what was changed or what was a lie or what was altered? So I understand that probably would not be entertaining to get chapters of Violet in the library or the archives, but I don't know, maybe she would have found more journals from the other members of the first six or something like that. That would have been exciting to me actually if we got more journals from them and we get to dive into everything that was going on with them. So I know cutting contact with the Isles was kind of a big thing, and seeing these Isles worship gods individually is important, but we didn't really see the history of how that came to be or why. We just learned that each Isle has a god they favor, but we don't get any deeper than that. So next, I was a little disappointed that Theophanie's character died so quickly because, as we said, we really liked her as a villain, and I felt like there was a lot of potential to use her for tension or information about the Venom moving forward. And now that she's dead, I feel like she was just used to kind of tie into the dedication aspect and its connection to the gods. I'm assuming we're going to learn about that later, but I got to be careful with my assumptions so that I know what I expect.
So you don't get disappointed for next book.
Yeah. My second to last point, similar to Theophany, I felt like it was a little silly for Andarna to disappear and then come back in like 20, 30 pages or whatever it was. At that point, I was like, why have her leave at all? Mostly, I just hope that she got some answers that hopefully we'll get in the next book. Because if she was just like hiding out on the continent and didn't learn anything about the Irids, I'm going to be a little upset about that.
Ooh, yeah. I didn't even think about that. Yeah.
And my last dislike, in the end, the book was exciting and kept us questioning things, but you kind of touched on this, I think, in your overall rating section, but I felt like there was a lot of red herrings, lies, and partial truth information that was used as a way to keep us entertained or distracted so that we don't wonder why we're not getting any more answers. Mostly, I just want some more foundational information about the magic system that we know for sure is true. I do not like having things be questioned back and forth and have multiple different potential reasons why magic is the way that it is, because there was so much like flip-flopping or learning that what we knew previously was false. And so now you have to go back and like restructure your understanding from the very bottom. And I feel like that's because there is no clarification, I guess more so of what you can't do. Like, I'm fine with not knowing what the upper bound of the magic system is. That's fine. We can speculate about that. But I really do want to have like a clear, this is not possible, so that we know what the baseline is.
Well, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think about like Back and Forth Wing, learning that everything we know about the world is a lie because Navarre hid this huge secret. That's a great plot twist, and that's really engaging. You can only do that so many times in a series before you create a mistrust with the reader and where you're like, this isn't even enjoyable because I just don't even know what's real and what's not, but not in a fun way. Like, I'm all for some dun 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 plot twists, right? Because like Fourth Wing, perfect example of that. But you only get to do that so many times before we're just like, you've drained us. You've drained us of our trust. Yeah.
I'm just tired. And then I stopped wanting to think about it, I guess, because I'm like, well, what's the point of investing? Yeah, what's the point of investing energy if in a couple chapters for now, we're just going to learn that whatever was said at the beginning was like false or whatever. I don't know.
I totally agree. I think that's an excellent point.
So yeah, those were my dislikes. What were your dislikes?
Uh-oh. Uh-oh. If I start talking too fast, just yell at me. Sometimes when I get really heated, I get really hyped. I'm just like, yeah. Like that, basically. So I mentioned this in my rating explanation, but it felt like she was intentionally withholding information just to create and facilitate speculation. And that withholding did not drive the plot in any way. And that was frustrating. So just kind of reiterating that. I really had a lot of issues with that. We didn't get any damn answers. Very frustrating. I, like Lorraine, was very disappointed that Theophany died so quickly. I know I said that in the last deep dive episode, so I won't do a full rehash here. But my reasons are pretty much the same as Lorraine's. I'll also add that now that she's gone, I don't think we'll ever get her full backstory. And I would have really liked to learn her origin story, really, because she's such a great villain. I also would have really liked to see more of her and Berwin's relationship. It's pretty obvious they've got this really interesting dynamic and what seems like a rivalry. And I think I would have really enjoyed reading that or being exposed to, I guess, kind of the dynamics of the villains of the other side. Because then are great villains, right? They're so interesting in their motivations and their powers and their secrets. There's more to them than they're just big bads who want to consume the world. You know, and I think Theophany and Berwin's relationship is so interesting, and their tensions, like, are they working together? Are they not? They seem to hate each other. Like, what's the differences between them? Who's more powerful? And now we're never going to get that. So unless Theo is actually still alive, which she should not be under any circumstances.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Doom got her. Like she
Dude, yeah, she sliced her soul from her body.
And all right, that was your last bit of soul, Theo. Go to Malik now officially.
Oh yeah, no, I think she's gone for sure. But I was just kind of hinting if she comes back, I'm gonna have a problem, which I don't think she will.
Yeah,
I feel the same about Indarna. From a story perspective, I thought it was great that Indarna left. It tracked well with Indarna's character arc and her wants and her motivations, and it was very interesting for Violet's story arc. But it was so short-lived, and at this point, it seemed like a pointless storyline. I'm just like, oh, you needed something to make Violet sad, so then Mira could come, and then Brennan and her could fight. I'm like, what was the point of that? And so this is one of those things, of course, I need to see what happens before I can really decide. But as of right now, it's a no for me. It's a hard no. Okay. I mentioned this at length in the deep dive episode, but this book was in tragic need of more exposition. Not everything in a book needs to be written for crystal clear understanding by the reader, but when a notable portion of the readership is having trouble following, to me, it says it's an issue with the writing and the editing. And I think that an irrefutable claim. I know some people are like, I had no trouble following at all. And that's great. You're brilliant. I love you for that. But
yes,
it wasn't just like a few people. It was a lot of people. And I think that says something about the writing, especially in the beginning.
Yes.
I also felt like Xaden and Violet both had some departures from what I would call core character traits that were very irksome to me. And I'll start with Xaden. Since the moment his father was executed, Xaden has been an action first, ask questions later kind of guy. If there's a problem, he will solve it by whatever means necessary. And in this book, I felt like, honestly, he was a bit whiny and he just kind of gave up. It really seemed like he was just like, yep, there's no hope for me. It's not if/when. I know he did kind of try to fight for a cure and all that, but even his efforts seemed very defeatist. And his attitude about it seemed very defeatist. It seemed like he was trying more for Violet's sake than for his own self. And I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Also, I know Lorraine said this earlier. Violet just quit using her brain. I mean, she just flat out quit using it. I'm sorry she did. What made us fall in love with Violet in Fourth Wing is that she had the mind of a scribe. How many times did they say that? The mind of a scribe and the heart of a writer. She found joy and strength and knowledge, and her ability to observe and think through problems is what made her so special and so unique as a writer. This was also then solidified even more in Iron Flame when her entire mission was to think through how to get the wards back up. That entire book is Violet using her brain to solve problems.
Yeah.
And it feels like in this book, Violet just adopted a no thoughts, just vibes mentality. I don't want to beat this to death because Lorraine and I pointed this out a lot when it happened in real time in the book. There were just so many things Violet didn't notice or figure out or didn't even bother to think about later. Like, I feel like what would happen is Violet would be like, did she just say that? And Tara would say, questions later, focus now, which is fine. That's fair. But then she never went back to the question.
Exactly.
She was like, oh, on to the next one. Satan's up, man, and meh. You know, like that was like her entire thought process. You know what I mean? Meh. It's not even necessarily that I needed her to figure things out. It was that there were moments or conversations that she didn't even question. Honestly, I feel like she did all of her best, I'll call it calculative thinking and maneuvering in the first 6 or 7 chapters of the book, getting the erasure cord signed, you know, changing the ward stone and getting the flowers to be able to stay at Best Guys. That was the Violet I love. And then after that, it was just like literally crickets. It was just like, you know, it was frustrating. Okay, I only have 2 more. This one is short. The dialogue in the very last spicy scene, woof. I won't rehash it. Go back and listen to chapters 44 through 49. My rant about this scene is pretty entertaining, I think, and actually inspired the title for that episode, Thighs, Cries, and Goodbyes, because it was hard to get through. And as someone who was like, I'm here for the spice, especially Xaden and Violet's, because Rebecca Yarros writes top tier spice, but that one in particular, I couldn't even enjoy it. Here's how you know. I haven't gone back to re-listen to that part, not even once.
I didn't bookmark it.
Dude, same.
I think it was a little cheesy. It was too cheesy for me.
I'm telling you, I said it in the episode. I was recoiling. I was like, oh my God, like keeping my hands off you has been the feat of my life. And I was like, boy, your parents were literally executed. I can't. Don't get me started. Just go listen to that episode again. I can't relive that. Okay.
The rhyming. That's what got me.
Your thighs and cries.
Your breathy little cries.
Don't start again. I can't. I'll never make it through this episode. Oh my God. Okay. The last one is really more of a potential critique that will be determined by how book 4 and 5 goes. I feel like Rebecca Yarros potentially did what I call trapdoor writing. And that is when in fantasy books, you have complex systems of magic that can potentially contradict each other and create this confusing hierarchy of which power trumps the other. They write these lines or plot points, which are basically trapdoors for them to escape out of a hole that they have written themselves into. It happens a lot in books where there's time travel. because time travel is really tricky to write because the rules of it are kind of funky. That was a weird tangent, but that's just an example of when authors have to do that, okay? And I love complex systems of magic, but you've got a lot going on here. You've got signets, violet second signet specifically, dragon magic, flyer magic, runes, the powers that the Venom have, and now the gods. And I'm just afraid that she'll write herself into a corner and then be like, boom, here's some all-powerful god magic. It solves everything. Or, like the Irids, they are magic themselves and there's basically nothing they can't do. And that's boring. That's not fun. I hope that's not the case, but it does happen in fantasy books. It really does. And so it's more of this book has created that fear for me is kind of more my dislike. Because as Lorraine really aptly pointed out, we just don't know what the floor is of certain things, like runes, for example. There's all this question of, what rune's tempered into, what shape, what material, how much power, does it work on the continent, off the continent? And there's just too much unknown about ambiguity. Yeah. And if runes were all of the magic, then that's fine. But you got a lot of fucking magic going on in this book that does not have clear limitations and boundaries. And that makes me nervous.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the whole even magic things and balance thing is starting to get real weird to me because people have more than one signet, but you also have evil beings who have multiple powers that seemingly are just totally unstoppable until you get to a god, which is what happened in Theophanie's case. Theophanie was just all powerful, but June is the wrathful goddess. She killed her. June can do it. And so I agree with that sentiment. We'll just kind of have to see how it gets explained or how it plays out for me to officially have a decision about it. But I totally agree that we are introducing a lot of different types and avenues for magic. And I agree. You're going to have to tread carefully with all that.
You're going to be real careful. The sentiment I echoed to Lorraine almost throughout this entire deep dive was, I think this is a trust the process of this book, of her writing. And I think by book 4, either that book will be God tier, or it'll be oh, it's going to go in that direction. Which, of course, I will absolutely still read it because of Riddick, of Riddick and Taryn and Darna and Xaden, But yeah.
All right. Well, next we just have some outstanding questions and predictions left to go. So we'll start with our outstanding questions, things we still want to know. First, I want to know, where are Xaden and Sigale now? What have they been doing? Where can they go? I'm assuming they're going to stay on the continent because they can't go to the Isles. But next question, who took the eggs and why? What is that going to be for? Because that's obviously a very big thing that raises a lot of suspicion and questions and everything. Third question, what other traders are in leadership? Because I definitely don't think it was just Panchak. I think there are many others that we're probably going to figure out. I also want to know which elders were killed, because presumably the elders of, the dragons and stuff, was this a calculated thing? Did they mean to target specific elders? Was it just a byproduct of trying to get the eggs? It was just kind of I need the eggs, you're in my way, gone. Okay. That's it. And then my final question that I had written for now, how come no one went back to investigate the archives?
Oh, yeah.
Why is no one going into the archives and trying to figure out what information is still in there and just start cross-referencing everything, right?
Yeah.
If Warwick and Lyra's journals were in a royal vault somewhere and they were in the archives, then presumably there are other documents like that or similar in historical nature that they could go get. But no one did that. And so I'm guys, that seems the most obvious place, to me at least, to go check.
That's fair. I will say, I think Rebecca Yarros' answer to that would be Jesinia is working on that. And that's what Jesinia told Riddick. Remember when Riddick kind of made her mad? And she's like, do you know how much I have to read? Just this journal alone is 600 pages, and she kind of did this whole rant.
Right.
But to that end, we never checked back in with Jesinia. That was the last time. And that was chapter...
It was 15 or 16 or something.
I guess technically they did go tell her that Xaden was a Venom, but you don't even talk to Jesinia. It was just like they go and tell her, and then we never check back in with her. So I see what you're saying. I think Jacinia will play a much bigger role in book 4, for sure.
Well, considering she's the curator of all of these books.
That's true. Well, I will say retweet to all of those. And I'll also add my absolute top priority is what the fuck really happened with Naolin and Brennan. This is all I want to know in book 4. You don't have to tell me anything else. Just tell me what the fuck happened with Naolin and Brennan. I need to know.
Addison's Roman Empire.
It's my Roman Empire. That is probably my most Googled theory. I even asked ChatGPT, I was like, have you read these books? And can you tell me what you think happened? Because I want to know. Oh, it said a bunch of interesting things. Oh, yeah. There were several interesting things. We'll save it for the theories episode.
I wanted you to spill some of them now.
No, yeah, you're going to have to tune in, guys. Anyway, I also really want to know more about the first 6 and what went down between them. We know there's something going on with the Warrens between Warwick and Lyra, speculation that they were romantically involved, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Also, the Empyrean. We know absolutely nothing about them. I think I actually should have added that to my dislikes, but we really truly got no information about them. And in fact, what was revealed to us in this book actually made them more confusing and untrustworthy. And again, it's called the Empyrean series. So maybe some damn answers about the Empyrean would be super nice. And then what, if any, although we highly speculate there is, Violet's connection to Dune and, quote, the other who curries her favor, unquote. That was really intriguing to me. I was like, whoa. So I really want to know about that. I know Lorraine's like, yes, in particular. Obviously, there's a million things we want to know, but kind of a more pressing one for me is, what do the Irids know and what's their backstory? Like, what's their deal? Like, I know they kind of told us, like, we abhor violence, so we left, but, like, what happened? And I think you raised this question. How does none of the dragons in the Empyrean currently know anything about the Irids? I'm assuming they left like 650 years ago, so there's probably not dragons that were alive at that time, but the dragons live for hundreds of years. I think Taryn says he's 100 and he's like middle-aged. So I would assume like Irids were discussed to like each generation, and the fact that no one had any idea.
Well, the Empyrean, they definitely know because they held on to
You think so?
They held on to Andorna's egg.
Well, see, okay, this is perfect. More we'd like to know. See, more we'd like to know.
They have to know things. They have to.
I don't know.
Aren't discussing them. At least a little bit. Probably at least something.
All right.
Excellent question, though. Retweet to all of your questions, too. Yes.
Thank you.
All these. All right, so now we just have our final section, which is just some quick predictions. These are nothing like deep diving into anything specific, but just things we think could happen in the next book and everything. So I feel like first off, we're going to go to Loisum. That was the only unexplored isle so far. And I'm hoping that we'll find the damn Irids and get our freaking answers. Or if it's not about the Irids, then it could be about dedication, since Loyal is the other god who requires a lifetime service and changes a soul irrevocably.
Agreed. Put it on my list.
I also feel like we're going to get action with the gods, especially now that we've had a competitive dynamic set up between Dune and another god that curries Violet's favor. I have said on the podcast that I think we're going to get some like hands-on interaction with them, and I'm going to stick by that.
Oh, wow. Bold. Yeah. Okay.
Never let them know your next move. Okay, and then next.
Oh my God. We're gonna... A spider is just like crawling in front of me.
Mike, is it big?
No, but it just like dropped down in front of me. Now it disappeared.
Never let him know
you're next.
It's like perfect timing.
Oh my God! Oh, he's so fast.
He's fast
as fuck, boy. He's gone now. I don't know where he went. No shot. We cut that out of the episode, huh? No shot. We're gonna cut that out. I didn't think it was that funny.
I did.
Okay. Sorry, continue, please.
All right, next. I think we're definitely going to learn more about dedication, and Violet will possibly complete her dedication to get additional help from Dune or to ensure her and Xaden's safety from the Venom. Next, I think that Tyrandor will become independent again. I'm not going to say for sure which book it's going to be, but there's like no way it's not at this point.
I agree. I think book 5, though, not book 4, but I agree.
Okay, fair. Next, Violet is going to go head-to-head with Berwin now, and he's going to be the main bad Venom in the next book. And she also needs him to get to Xaden because we know Xaden can't kill Berwin. So it's going to have to be Violet or... Oh!
Did a spider fall down on you?
Kelso sneezed, but he was like... I just heard like the... And then, I don't know. Okay. That's a mess.
Jump scare. Remember how we said this episode is not going to be too long?
Okay. And also, she needs him to get to Xaden because we know Xaden can't kill Berwin. So it's going to have to be Violet because she's kind of the only one set up to be able to find him. Specifically with the dream walking stuff and everything. I can't say for sure if Violet's going to be able to kill him. Like, that's a separate discussion. But presumably... finding Xaden also comes with finding Berwin. So,
agreed.
Because they're linked and everything. Next, Andarna will learn her truth with the Irids, and something about that is related to how to keep the Venom at bay or, restore peace within the world. And then my last little prediction, I still feel like we're going to get a new group of 6 powerful riders and signets.
Wow, yours were really well thought out and plot-based. You know what my number 1 is? Dane and Sloane are definitely going to become a couple, 100%. That's my top prediction.
A little side enemies to lovers here.
Oh yeah, eyes here, baby. Eyes here. She better rework that line into a spicy scene. That would be so good. She has to do that. She has to. I know she won't let us down. Very similarly, I feel like Imogen will tell Garrick how she feels. I don't know if it'll turn into a romance, but I do feel like Quinn's death will impact her and she'll be like, Quinn's right. I have to live for the now kind of vibe.
Gotta live a little. Mm-hmm.
Live a little. That's right. I also feel that in book 4, Xaden will be cured or at least under control enough with a cure that is soon to be granted to him so that he can come back in this book physically. We'll talk more about this in the theories episode. I know Lorraine and I talked about this off camera. I have a kind of a sense, in my opinion, how I think the plot of book 4 and 5 will go and like some justifications for that. So we'll talk about in the theories episode. But I think that for book 4, I think I'm pretty safe to say that. I also think that the Irids will ally or at least agree to help in book 4. I think the Irids are going to come back up in a much bigger way.
Mm-hmm.
This is probably pretty obvious, but we're going to learn and do a lot more with Violet's dreamwalking signet. And most importantly, Violet and Xaden will definitely have spicy time together using Violet's dreamwalking signet. Ain't no way that book 4 is going to be dry. There's got to be at least one. And if Xaden's not around, how do we do that? Dreamwalking, baby.
Oh, no, I like those though. I like these predictions as well. Retweet and also add to my list.
Okay, cool.
These are all we're just combining
the synergy that's happening right now. I love it.
Yeah. All right. And that actually concludes our book wrap up, guys. So we're almost done with Onyx Storm. Not quite. We still have our theories episode to go, but this now concludes our episode today. So thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Book Down Fantasy Podcast. As always, we are so glad that you found us. So please leave us a review, subscribe to the podcast, and follow us on Instagram or YouTube to keep up with us on a daily basis. That's all we've got for you guys today.
So stay violent.
And we'll catch you all next week. Bye.
Bye. And stay tuned for some funny spider bloopers.
Oops. Okay.
A little roadmap.
Starting with... Wait, okay. I lost my place here.
It's okay. This doc is only 78 pages. So
okay, here we go. Kelsey just
he said, man, it's been a long time since he did that.
He's very close to me right now. Okay.
Secondary to that, I loved all the politics. He's super funny and brings a lot of comedic brings a lot of comedic relief. I also feel like Gimogen. Oh my God, I've lost it. I've lost control. Okay.